and welcome back to The Movies Made Us Do It. Me and Matt are back. How are you, Matt?
I'm pretty good, sir. How are you?
I'm alright. It's been a bit of a week, but that's why we're slightly delayed. And, of course, a different film. Not the film we were going to review. I don't think we said which film we were going to review last time.
No.
But we did have a different film in mind, which we will get to eventually. But, of course, we then found out the unfortunate passing of Tony Todd.
Indeed.
Well, I guess we could do a slight tribute to him up front. I mean, what an actor, what a voice.
Yeah.
Which this film is so much centered around his voice, you know?
Yeah. A lot of it, you don't see him, you just hear him.
Yeah.
For a lot of stuff, you know. I mean, he doesn't actually turn up physically till 40 minutes in.
Is that right? Yeah, I was... Yeah, it is a while. And of course, you get fake Candyman first, I think.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So yeah, we are, of course... Well, I've just given it away, haven't I? We are, of course, talking about Candyman from 1992, which is way more recent than I thought it was. I for some reason, in my head, this was an 80s movie.
Oh, okay. No,
I don't know why.
It's very much 90s in my head, so...
Well, it's weird. It was 80s in my head, and then I was rewatching this, and I was like, no, these are clearly 90s haircuts. These are clearly early 90s awkward haircuts. Like,
yeah.
I don't know why I thought that, but yeah, I did for some reason. So, when did you first see Candyman?
Video release.
Yeah, same.
Video.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those sort of... There was a lot of buzz around it at the time when it came. I think it did really well in the cinema, and obviously I was, I think, too young to see it in the cinema at the time. But as soon as it came on video, I absolutely straight out and got it.
Yeah, I mean it certainly. I'm sure it's in some people's top 5, but certainly a top 10 when you're talking about horror icons. I think the Candyman is in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think Todd himself was not only an amazing actor in many movies. I mean, in Platoon and different versions of. Well, he was in the Night of the Living Dead, which we sort of touched on when we did our.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like that remake. I've got a soft spot for that.
We talked about him on when we did The Crow.
Yes.
He's brilliant in The Crow, even though it's a sort of a minor role. It's still a great role, and he's one of my favourite Star Trek guests. Is Kern?
Yeah, he was in a bunch of episodes because he also played Sisko's son. He played Jake, didn't he? He played Jake in the alternate future, which was a great episode.
Which is a great episode. But I always thought I don't ever see Jake growing up to be Tony Todd.
No, not at all. Not at all. I was like, what, are we supposed to believe that he goes through puberty and then just suddenly... Actually, no, because by that point, the actor was old enough that there's no way. You're like, no, there's no way you're turning into Tony Todd. It's not happening, sir. Maybe if you did that episode in season 1, you might get away with it. But by that point, it's like, no, you've gone through puberty. There's no way you're Tony Todd. You do not have that voice even remotely.
No.
But no, he was a repeat actor on Star Trek and always put in a great performance. I mean, he's one of those actors that, even in those lower budget films that he turns up in, he's going to be good.
Yeah. And, I mean, he voiced, I think, Darkseid so many times as well, a number of times in animated movies.
I think he's quite a prolific voice actor.
Yeah, and I think he did Venom as well, so he did...
Yeah.
I think, basically, you name the big voiced bad guy, he's probably
done it, yeah. Yeah.
Because I know he also voiced, was it Zoom in the Flash series?
Yeah.
Which was great because I think I was still watching it then. It was still it was okay at that point. It was getting rapidly downhill, but it was still watchable at that point.
It had a sweet spot, that show, for sure.
Yeah, but he was such a a real gentleman and always happy to talk to people, and what great guy he was.
Yeah,
and a
absolutely.
phenomenal actor. And I just felt that we needed to change what we're doing.
And this was always on the list. There was never a doubt that we were going to do Candyman eventually.
Yeah.
So,
and we'll probably also do another one that only a minor thing in, but we'll probably do Final Destination at some point as well.
I would have thought so. I'm up for Final Destination. Why not?
And he's got a very minor part of that, but he's great. I mean, there's that sort of the debate of, is he actually death or not?
Yeah.
Or is he just a simple, mortician? But
yeah, absolutely.
And one of the funny things is they originally wanted Eddie Murphy for the role of Candyman, which would have been interesting.
I mean, that could have been very interesting. If Eddie Murphy had pulled it off, that could have been a real sort of range for him, show a very different side.
He'd done some dramatic stuff at this
point. He did. Yeah.
Not a great deal of it, and
I felt like this might have cemented it, if he'd done this.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, let's get into it. And we kind of open on one of the things I really wanted to kind of touch on this movie as soon as you said it, because one of my lasting memories of this film is those amazing shots, those cinematic shots. This one we've got panning the highway, I think, as we go through the city. But all of those sky shots are incredible.
Yeah, and it was used with I think it was called the Sky Cam.
Yeah, that's right.
A new lens at the time.
And oh my god, they put it to such good use. It looks incredible, and of course, when you're teaming it with this incredible score.
Oh man, what a score!
It's wonderful.
So, it's a Philip Glass score, and do you know he really hates this movie?
I don't know why. I love this movie.
Well, he was. I think he thought it was going to be a different sort of movie. He thought it was going to be a lot more serious and a lot more, I guess, down to earth. I don't think he. I'm not sure whether they explained.
Did he maybe think that Candyman was actually a serial killer rather than a supernatural thing?
I don't know what he was told, but he was very disappointed with the movie and was kind of like pissed off that he did the score for it.
Well, I can understand being annoyed if you were misled or you felt misled.
Yes, if he was misled, then that's one thing. But if it's just the fact that you think it's a bad movie and which it's not. But he says he gets a check for it, so he doesn't mind it that much. And it's like, well, okay, fine.
I always forget as well how kind of over the top this movie gets initially, with the like sky full of bees and like you've got like a swarm of bees taking over the city and stuff, and obviously it transitions to see that it's Helen hearing a story about the Candyman. Of course this girl's telling the story of someone she knew or heard about who was in love with this bad boy and had him come round on his bike, and it's Raimi, isn't it?
That's one of my favorite things as well. It's one of the funny things. It's like,
he is one of those guys that's always up for being killed in someone else's movie.
Yes,
he just loves it. He's like, yeah, of course. Of course.
I love the fact that Ted Remy is playing the bad boy in this movie.
Yeah, I know. He's like the furthest from it.
Really? You mean the same Ted Remy that's like the nerdy character in almost everything else?
I know.
Yeah, I love that.
But she invites him around for sexy time, except he keeps all of his clothes and his jacket on. She just starts taking her clothes off, and then she's like, hey, I want to play this fun game. Let's look in the mirror, and if you say Candyman 5 times, he will appear. He does eventually, because he chickens out, doesn't he? And she's like, oh my god, you didn't say it the final time. And then of course he
leaves the room, and then she finishes it.
Yes.
So finishes the last Candyman, and then the storyteller tells that she was killed, the baby they were looking after was killed.
Yes.
He basically got away, but went bibble and his hair went white, I think.
Yes, just turned white. Yeah. Which can happen. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, we then transition to seeing it's Helen there interviewing this classmate, so she's a kind of, well, she's a uni graduate, right? And she's kind of working on like a thesis around Candyman. So she's getting interviews.
But it's around
urban myths,
urban legends, and
because we meet that sleazy fuck later on.
Yes.
Which, by the way, the sequels to the Candyman are not great. The second one is worth watching for the first 10 minutes just to see that guy get his comeuppance. That's the only reason to watch it.
Now you say that, but I kind of like his character because
I like him. I like him as like someone I hate, you know.
Yeah, but when they're having the conversation about,
she does go like, "I'm going to destroy you," and it's like, wow, that's harsh.
I mean, clearly he's a dick.
Yeah.
But she initiates it, and he's like, he's right. What is like?
Who are you to come along and
properly yet? They haven't looked into the story yet, and they're going, "Oh, we're going to bury him." He's like, "Yeah, I did a paper on that 10 years ago."
Yeah, and I'm a prolific writer in this field.
Yeah, so
because then he starts talking about how, well, we'll get to it in a bit, but he starts talking about how much research he did on it already. He's like, I spent like best part of a year on this.
Yeah,
you know. But Helen heads to see her I think husband, maybe boyfriend.
It's her husband. Yeah.
Husband, yeah. Who is a professor of some kind. He's giving a lecture to students, including one woman.
Well, I think he must be he's a literary professor, isn't he?
Yes, yeah.
Because they have an argument about what he's the subject he's doing.
Well, she's so selfish. Like immediately, she's like, "I cannot believe you're doing this talk on urban myths without me," and he's like, "There's a like." I have to follow the fucking program. These kids, like, I can't just hold back these kids' educations for you. You know, like, what are you doing? But yeah, she's all mad about it. But of course, she's more annoyed because she's already suspecting that he's a bit dodgy and after this.
Well,
this
to be
college.
I mean, yeah, the girl.
I mean, she's clearly into him.
Yeah, but he's also slobbering over her, like, you know.
Yes.
They couldn't be more obvious if he had his tongue down her throat. You know what I mean? They are pretty much almost at it right on the you know on the front of the
I like they do the really awkward handshake when he introduces her, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, we'll shake hands," and then she kind of awkwardly hangs around. She's like,
just a little bit
she
too long.
Hangs around longer than the rest. She's like, "Oh yeah, bye then, bye."
Yeah. And just staring at her as she goes up the stairs. Isn't
Yeah.
It? Like,
yeah.
Oh, love! You just be less obvious if you can.
Yeah. You're all hormones right now.
Sort of feel sorry for her because she's clearly not the brightest.
No, and in fact, the end of this movie is one of my favorite bits, where it's like, "Well, dude, you got what you asked for. You're living with this annoying teenager."
Yeah, exactly.
Congratulations. When he's thinking about like Helen making him lovely meals and just being wonderful, it's like, yeah, well.
Yeah. Exactly. It always reminds me of that moment in the original series Star Trek episode with a mock time.
Oh yeah, mock time. Yeah.
In the end, when he goes up to Ston and he says, "You will find that wanting a thing and having a thing are very different."
Yep. It's not wrong.
It's like, fuck you, Ston. He's like, you think you've won here. It's like, I don't think you have.
But yeah, so later, I guess she's kind of working late on this report or thesis that she's doing. She's typing away, and one of the cleaners comes in, and she says, "Oh, do you mind if I clean?" And she's like, "No, of course." And she hears what's on the dictaphone, which is this woman kind of recounting the Candyman.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, Candyman, huh?" And Helen's like, "Oh, you've heard of him?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah." And of course they get into the discussion around, "Oh, you're doing a study on him. Well, my friend saw him. My friend knows all about him." And she actually calls her friend in. And I think this is where we get our first mention of Cabrini Green.
Yeah,
that he's renowned around the projects, particularly in Cabrini Green. He's kind of well known, and that he killed a lady there. So she gets her friend to come in, she's kind of really nervous. This friend, she's like, I don't, it's like there was a lady there. She heard a noise. And I can't remember what this story is because you can tell that one of the things I really like about this movie is that it does. There's some stories where you're like, that's probably a real Candyman thing, and then there's other stories where it's like debatable.
Yeah.
Although I think this is the one because this is the one that she goes to investigate, which is clearly Candyman. But I do like you do get a spectrum of stories. Not all of them are like definitely Candyman. Some of them are like, especially because we do get introduced to this Candyman fake. The drug dealer who's using it.
I think that's the kind of the point of the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's the idea that the Candyman, which because Candyman gets put in with the slasher genre, and it's not really. It's way more complicated than that.
It is, yeah, absolutely, and it's almost more. It's kind of closer to Freddy, where he later Freddy, where he's losing his powers because people don't believe in him. It's kind of that he needs his myth to continue, and Helen trying to disprove it is causing him issues.
And that's part of the whole sort of I heard that this murder was this.
Yes,
murder.
yeah.
And it's like, it could be that though, when it's like, but that
it could be that. This is a place I think her friend says later, like how many deaths there are at Cabrini Green every year. So it's like they're not all Candyman, but there is this fear, this looming fear of the Candyman.
And this story is actually based on a real incident.
Is it really? Because it's a Clive Barker story, right? It's a short story.
So the Clive Barker story, that's a separate thing. So the Clive Barker thing is actually set in England.
I've never read it, so yeah, I've no idea.
I haven't either, but it's set in England and it's set in Liverpool.
Oh, okay.
And the Candyman is a white guy. It's not a black guy. His skin's yellow, but it's
right. Yeah.
He's got ginger beard and he's supposed to be.
See, I think the Candyman's particular story is half of what makes this film.
Well, I think the director Bernard Rose decided to change it to Chicago to make make it more of an American story, which this fits perfectly with. And the thing that does make sense about this and that the original story is it's the bonfire. It's a
Oh yeah, so the bonfire
the bonfire it's an English thing. It's
well, yeah, it is, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, 5th of November. It's actually, if I remember rightly, the story takes place around that time. So that's why the huge bonfire they have in this place makes more sense for England.
For England, yeah, it would make absolute sense. Yeah.
But the story of the woman killed on the somebody got in through the hole that was behind the medicine cabinet.
Well, we're getting to that now because
yes, that's the thing. It was an actual real event. There was a real murder that took place in the Abbott housing homes in '87.
Oh, okay.
So Ruthie Mae McCoy was killed. It was one of those sort of she heard this noise. She phoned the police. They basically ignored her,
and then she was
then he got in, killed her. But there were like days before anybody went properly. The police turned up with the security. The police wanted to break in, and the security guy said, "No, better not. We'll come back later." Meanwhile, this poor woman's been murdered inside. And it wasn't until her neighbor was like, "No, there's definitely something wrong. I haven't seen her for for a day or so. This is serious now." And then when they turned up and they found that the person had actually got in through this hole in the cabinet.
Speaking of that, she later has her best friend come round who's also working on this or I don't know whether she's working on it with her or she's just kind of reluctantly dragged along with everything she's doing.
No,
they are co-interviewing at times, so I'm assuming they're
both working on the same thing, aren't they?
But she's like, oh look, she's like, look, this isn't this isn't a fairy tale. People actually fucking die at Cabrini Green. Like, people have actually been murdered. Like, this person was actually murdered. I'm not sure this falls into our urban myths thing, but she's like, well, no, but look at this. And she shows her 2 newspaper clippings. One is of Cabrini Green, and one is of where she lives. And she's like, these aren't both Cabrini Green. Basically, they decided they built all of these buildings, but then they realized they wanted like a divide, right? A gap. So these buildings got renovated and turned into these fancy condos, and they kind of joke about her, basically being ripped off for this place.
Yeah.
But then she's like, look, this is how she was murdered, and she goes to the mirror and she removes the mirror and she pushes through the mirror on the other side, and of course you can see the other apartment. There's no one living there, but you can get through into the other apartment through the mirrors. Now, personally, I would be fucking moving out the day I discovered that was there. I would be like, I am not living in a place like this.
Yeah, I would be hiring a bricklayer to...
Yeah, or at the very least you would put brick... Yeah, I would definitely concrete that up. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, but she seems to think it's quite cool, and I guess it kind of proves that how the murder was done, that it is possible in this way, because Cabrini Green was built at the same time as this building with the same architecture, the same kind of plan, I guess.
Yeah, she says that all the rooms are basically having almost exactly the same layout.
Yes, yeah. And then of course, because they've got a mirror in front of them, and they're like, hey, we should do the Candyman. And they kind of joke about it, and I think she chickens out, doesn't she? She doesn't say it the final time.
Bernie's like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Oh, Bernadette, thank you. I couldn't remember her name. That was really annoying me.
Yeah. Bernie, yeah, nope. I don't think so.
No. Later that night, of course, Helen is in bed. No husband. I think she hears him come in super late, and he kind of like surprises her, and it's all jokey and funny, but you can tell she knows something is obviously up. But yeah, so you kind of get the impression they obviously have something of a strain. It's strained from her perspective, not from his. Like, he thinks he's getting away with whatever he's getting away with. She's clearly aware that something is up.
Yeah.
So sometime later, despite Bernadette being like, this is a terrible idea, Helen has convinced Bernadette that they should go to Cabrini Green. Bernadette's like, okay, cool, but I'm going to take every attack alarm and weapon I can get my hold on and get my hands on.
Spray. I think there's a taser as well, and it's like, yeah, I think she's right to do that.
Yeah, I think she is too. And Helen kind of admonishes her. She's like, oh, you're just trying to scare me. She's like, no, I'm being realistic. Like, this place is really violent. Like, you're completely naive in the way you're going about this.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways, you kind of feel like Bernadette's only going to look out for her friend more than anything, because her idiot friend is just going to wander in there.
Very much so. I think Helen's an idiot. Really.
She is, yeah, and to the people's to the kids out front, to their point, they are dressed like fucking police.
Yeah.
They 100%. Like, I was like, yeah, you look like police. You do. You could have at least dressed down a little,
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, we get those wonderful shots of the projects and those aerial shots. Like you said, it was like a newish lens technology at the time, and I guess they were like, we're going to make the absolute most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do.
And it's great, though. It looks fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, this when you've got when it's going along the roads, the sort of highway sort of thing, and it's like really wide shot of this highway. It's weird and beautiful and sort of ugly as well. It's a really great shot.
Yes, it does kind of combine the two, doesn't it? It's kind of ugly, but also something really beautiful about it.
And they shot for 3 days, I think, at Cabrini Green.
Right.
Obviously, they went and spoke to the gangs, and I think it was something like there were 5 gangs that they had to talk to at the time.
Right.
So they agreed to sort of like leave them alone, and as long as they got like parts and stuff. So all those, I think almost everybody that you see there, they're all real gang members.
Yeah, which probably lends itself to the credence, because it does feel very very real.
And I think the only incident they had was somebody took pot shots at a generator at one point.
Right.
So and no one was actually hurt or anything, but yeah, they killed the generator.
Right. Well, that's probably the better of the options.
Yeah. But I think they were all. I don't think anybody had a comfortable time there. I think they were all scared whenever they were there.
Yeah.
And I think the director and Madsen and Todd when they first went there, I think they had a police escort, and they were sort of shown around the sort of the area. And I think they were like, yeah, this is not the nicest place to be.
Yeah. So they head up to the apartment where Ruthie was murdered, supposedly. You get the jump scare, I think, because you meet Anne-Marie, right? Annie Marie, because her dog comes out. This dog is responsible for like 80% of the jump scares in this film, by the way. But they find the door to the apartment open, right? It's like ajar, so they just head in, and you can tell Bernadette is just like, please just hurry up. Like, we need to go. There's probably a group of those kids, because they kind of get accosted on the way in and followed. And then it's like...
They're like, who you going to meet? And they're all like, they immediately think they're police. And
they are dressed like police.
They warn everybody else that the police are on their way, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And Helen, she does have a logical thing. And Bernie says, they're going to follow us. And she's like, no, they think we're police. They're going to leave us alone.
Yes.
And she's like, it's that sort of, okay, I see your logic there.
There is logic there, but I still would feel better if we just turned around and left.
Yeah. And of course, Helen's taking photos of everything, and there's lots of graffiti that clearly is connected to the Candyman. You've got the whole sweets for the suite,
yeah. And of course they find the mirror, and she can't resist opening that and taking a look through into the other apartment. And then to Bernadette's horror, she's like, I'm just going to go through there.
Yeah, and the hole in the back of this one is been hammered through. It's a jagged.
Yes, it almost looks like in this case it wasn't the way the other one was built, and they actually smashed through the other side.
Yeah.
But yeah, they can see straight through, and she decides, no, I'm going to go have a look, take some photos. And she's like, well, just hurry up, don't hang about, because this is a terrible idea. So of course she heads in with her camera, and she starts taking photos. And I love the graffiti of the Candyman with his mouth open.
Yeah,
that entrance is amazing.
His mouth into the next room, and it's a really cool picture.
It's one of those things I always remember about the film as well. Is that graffiti really sticks in my mind? Because it is just amazing. But yeah, so eventually she kind of jump scares her back out, because she runs out of film, doesn't she?
Yeah, she wants to go into some more film, but she finds a number of things. She finds like a offerings, isn't it? She finds offerings to sort of Candyman, and there's like a pile of sweets with razor blades in and things like that, and it's all very sort of. I think that the whole layer of the Candyman is very church-like. It has this
yes.
It has this offerings and this sort of this dilapidated church effect that
and it has the murals that you might find in some religious buildings as well. Which,
when she climbs up later and you see the
depicting the life and death of the Candyman in life.
Yeah.
Daniel is his name, wasn't it?
Yeah, is it Daniel Robitel? Is it?
That's right, something like that.
Robitelli. Yeah, she doesn't find that bit quite yet.
No, that's later.
yeah, there's these,
because that bit gets really weird. I've never quite sure what they were doing with that bit of the story, but I guess we'll get to that.
Yeah,
always felt a bit tacked on, almost like they were doing a Dracula thing, where it's like, it's always been you, Helen, and there's like she's in the mural, and it's like,
funny you say that, because that was their kind of template.
Was it? Okay, because they don't
Yeah,
really lean into it until like the last 5 minutes of the film, so it feels kind of rushed, you know?
There was initially there was no real backstory for the Candyman.
Oh, see, I love the backstory to this
because it's only a short story, and they don't go into that much detail in the short story.
See, because then he would be a generic slasher if there was no backstory. The backstory really makes this film for me.
It was Todd and Madsen that came up with the backstory. They discussed it amongst themselves, and they wanted Todd liked the idea of having a sort of this sort of Phantom of the Opera style character, this sort of, Dracula sort of, ish character that has almost a tragic gothic love story type thing, which they clearly have in this movie. So Todd came up with the whole.
It's great. I think it makes the movie, honestly.
Yeah, and the fact that he's not this sort of like monster. He's not your average monster. He's this educated.
Yeah, it elevates it.
He was a painter. He was an educated, clever man. And they have this sort of. They do have this very Dracula-esque thing. It's very, very close to the Bram Stoker's version.
It is,
say the Bram Stoker's version, the movie Bram Stoker's version.
Yes, yeah, I knew what you meant.
The Gary Oldman Dracula, let's say.
Yes, but it feels weird because they don't particularly lean into any of it until right towards the end.
Yeah.
Because you just think, well, I guess you could say he is kind of that way with her through the movie, but it kind of feels like he's just being creepy more than anything. And then at the end is like 5 minutes towards the end, they're like, oh yeah, it's always been you. And there's like she's in the mural, and like, oh, okay. But yeah, in any case, they head back down, and they are met by, or no, they don't head back down. Anna Marie comes in the building, and she's like, why are you in here? Like, what are you doing? And they say, oh, no, we're not police. Don't worry. We're reporters. Here's, have my card. And, do you know anything about this? And then of course her baby starts crying, and she's like, oh, my baby. So they head down, and I always felt like Helen was being a bit manipulative, where she's just like, oh, I love babies so much. I've always wanted babies. And it's like, you're so like, I find her character compelling, but she is quite often not very nice in this movie. She's
there's
a bit of an asshole.
Where she's
Bernadette, by comparison, is lovely. She seems really nice, but Helen seems like a bit of a bitch, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she's not a bad person.
No, but she's just,
she's certainly manipulative.
Just a bit of an asshole.
She certainly, gets away with stuff because of Bernie. She knows that Bernie won't do anything. She knows that she can rely on Bernie to help her out. Yeah. And she's not the as straightforward as that. It's actually a very good character trait. She's not a straight shooter, really. She's quite manipulative.
Yeah. So we learned that the baby's name is Anthony, and Anne-Marie says, look, he's all I've got. He's everything. It's just her, the kid, and the dog, right? I think.
Yeah, and she does say that she says that she asks her if she's has children, and she says no, but she wants one. Yeah, and I think she is genuine about that.
She probably is genuine about it. Yeah, I might be being a bit harsh.
I think she does certainly come across as being genuine when she's playing with the tot, as it were. Yeah.
But yeah, so she kind of it establishes that she says he's all I've got, and she also says sorry for being off with you, but white people aren't too handshaky and nice when they come here. It's generally going to be police and or people up to no good. They're not treating us nice here.
Yeah, it's actually she just says the only people that have been here are police and reporters. Yeah, and she says they're not reporters. They're students, as it were. So she kind of gives them a little more. She talks to them a little more, easier, because I think she realizes they're not. I guess after certain things, so.
And it's interesting because she recounts her story, the story from her perspective.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you telling me that this was based on a true story. Because, of course, she basically is that story. She says, like, I rang the police and no one came. Because people, in this story, it's because the police are scared to come there, right? They just won't go there. But she says, I called and no one was there. And this horrible tragedy happened. And I love that it then immediately contrasts to the jackass guy laughing at the meal. Yes. It's like this horrible story of this person dying alone because the police wouldn't go there to help, and then it's immediately contrasted to them, these wankers having a meal and just joking and laughing with each other and stuff.
Well, I think there's that thing when she's talking to Bernie, when she's talking about the housing estate and all that sort of, and she opens her curtains.
Yeah, and you can see it.
And points, and you can see Cabrini Green is literally just across the way. So you have that rich poor divide.
Well, that's the thing. There's a lot of racial commentary and also like wealth and that kind of wealth divide commentary in this movie. It's all over.
Yeah.
Classism. So they're having this meal. With the guy who has written many books, and she kind of lets slip because he's like, "Oh, I hear you're stepping on my territory. What are you writing?" She said, "Oh, it's a secret." But Bernadette mentions Cabrini Green, and he's immediately like, "Oh, Candyman territory," and he's like, "Well, then you should know that I've done this. I spent a year of my life working on the Candyman and researching." And she says, "Oh, we're gonna bury you." And
she's actually really. I mean, sure, he's clearly a bit of obviously a snob,
but he's done his work.
Yeah,
he has done his work, and I love that he's like, "So you know the story of the Candyman?" And she's like, "No." It's like, so you don't know anything. Like, so
and he laughs. He says, "Well, how are you going to bury me then?"
Yeah, and he recounts the story that Candyman was an artist in the 1800s, I think it was.
Yeah.
His father was a shoe. He made a certain type of shoe. So despite
his father was a freed slave who made a machine for
shoeing,
sizing shoes. I think.
Yeah. So as a result, Candyman, as a human, despite his race, actually was well educated. He actually
he was sent to the best sort of colleges, and he became educated, and he became a painter.
A very good painter. He painted wealthy people of status. And he was commissioned to, what does he say? Is something like a paint the daughter's virgin beauty or something like that. He says, but of course they fell in love. And obviously, being the time that it was, they were not having any of that. So he paid. I think that the father paid a bunch of local hooligans. To basically lynch the Candyman.
Yeah, they basically chased him through the town and beat him.
Yeah,
and then they took a rusty saw and removed his hand, and then where they chased him, there was an apiary next to them where he ended up.
Yeah.
And they then smeared his body. They broke open the apiaries.
Yeah, they stripped him as well, didn't they? And then they covered him.
Smeared his body in honey, and then he was stung to death by the bees.
Yeah. Pretty horrific. And as you said, it makes the film all the better for having a tragic backstory to your he's not just some monster.
Yeah.
So he basically, like, he does really show her, like, you don't know anything. you really don't know anything.
Yeah, sure. He's dick, but he's clearly done his stuff. He's not just there's a reason for his arrogance.
Yes, absolutely. No, yeah, absolutely. He is.
And if I remember rightly, doesn't he get it in the second movie?
In the opening of the second movie.
Yeah.
Because he's doing a book tour.
Because I must admit,
It's not great. None of the sequels are great.
Candyman I've seen lots.
Yes.
I've seen a number of times.
The first one is by far and away the best of the lot.
I think I've only seen the sequels once each.
Well, the second one is bad. The third one is awful.
Yeah, okay.
And then the new one, it's okay. Like, it's better than the sequels, but it's still nowhere touching this film. Basically, you know, it's kind of.
I haven't seen the. I do know that the main character, isn't he the kid from this?
It's Jake, isn't it? I think.
I think
it's either Jake or the baby, right? I'm not sure which.
Yeah,
might be the baby. Because it is a direct sequel to the original. So yeah. But speaking of Jake, we meet Jake. He's probably my favorite character in this movie. I love Jake. He's so cool. Because Helen goes back by herself because she's a moron. And presumably because Bernadette was like, "No, we're not going back there."
Bernadette's actually got some fucking sense.
Yeah, she's like, "We got away with it once. That's it." But she goes back looking for Anne Marie. She's not in, but she meets Jake. Who is clearly terrified of the Candyman. He says, like, I can't talk about anything because the Candyman will get me. And she says, are you scared of the Candyman? And he's like, I ain't scared of nobody, but you're crazy walking around here on your own. And it's like, well, you are right, kid. You are totally right. But yeah, and she, she kind of says, oh, I don't scare tough either. And, why don't you tell me? Tell me what you know. I'm not scared. You could show me if you don't want to tell me. And he's like, well, if you really insist. Because he says he knows where Candyman is, right? And she's like, well, why don't you show me where Candyman is? If you're not scared. And she kind of goads him into it, because doesn't she say, like, unless you're too scared? And it's like, this is a little kid. Like, what are you doing? You just terrorize this kid.
Yeah, well, because he's a little kid that wants to be brave.
Yeah.
So she completely manipulates him into.
They do walk past the bonfire on their way to the toilets, and they kind of just say it's for a party, like the nondescript party. But he walks her to some looks like public toilets, and it's just like Candyman's in there.
Yeah.
Because his friend said so. You just imagine that, like, his friend's like shitting up Jake and going, Candyman's in that building, and they're just terrified to ever go in that building. Yeah.
Well, no, he does tell them the story of what happened, and
oh yeah. But he's like, the Candyman is in that toilet. That to me is like the like childhood story, that your friend tells you or whatever to kind of scare you, and it's kind of become a thing. You just imagine them running past those toilets anytime they need to go past.
I don't think. I'm not sure it exists in the same way anymore, because I don't think the majority of kids go out, like we used to in the sort of 80s and the 90s, but there were always parts of the neighborhood that you just didn't go into because, something weird happened, or someone died there, or it was something. And I don't think that, I'm not sure that the kids these days have that same sort of thing of, oh, you don't go to that part of town, or you don't go there, because they don't really go out to that sort of thing anymore. And there is that whole idea of, the boogeyman lives there.
Yeah, okay? He lives right there.
Don't go there.
I always remember as a kid, there was like it was just a wall, but it was like a when you get those walls that look like they're made by hand rather than brick. Yeah. Me and my friends we were just like, oh yeah, witch lives in that house because of those bricks, just because of those bricks. But then it becomes a thing, and it's like, oh, this is scary. But
by us, there was some woods.
Like,
you don't go in there. People that go in there disappear. It's like, you don't really have any evidence as to why people disappear in those woods, but they do.
They do.
Don't go in them.
It's a fact. My friend said so. But he says like, don't go in there. You're like, she's like, have you ever been in there? He's like, no, I'm not going in there. You end up dead. He's like, can't fix that. Can't fix being dead. But of course she doesn't listen, and she heads in.
Well, he does it. He explains the story of what happened to her, doesn't he? He does.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So there's a kid that who was. Does he say he was a like retarded kid or something.
Something like that. I think he does. Yeah.
And that he was acting up, and the mum was in the shop. They went shopping or something, and the mum was in the shop, and he needed the toilet. So basically, she said, he was being a pain, so she told him to just go across the street, use the toilet. So he went in there, and then basically the Candyman castrated him.
Yes.
And
because he says you can't fix that, you're better off dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was lots of screaming, and people rushed in to sort of see, and there was one brave guy who went in and immediately regretted it.
Yeah.
And they went into. He was laid on the floor in a pool of his own blood, and his junk, as it were, was in one of the toilets,
yes,
sort of floating there.
Yeah. And of course she goes in to this toilet, and obviously it's just covered in shit everywhere, but it does say sweets for the sweet or to the sweet.
Yeah.
And it has an arrow pointing to one of the toilets, and so of course she looks, and it's full of bees.
Yeah.
So she quickly closes it and kind of walks away. Meanwhile, outside, Jake sees the Candyman. The Candyman turns up behind him, and he turns around and says, "Candyman." And we, of course, then see a man with the couple, basically a gang of guys walk into the toilets. She says, "Hey, I was just leaving." They grab her, and she says, people know I'm here. You're being stupid. Just let me go." But the one of the men, he's like wearing a big leather trench coat. He's like, "I hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch." And, basically you found him, and hits her across the face with his hook, because he's like holding it.
Yeah, I think bailing hook, isn't it?
Yeah. And Jake basically saves her life by going in there. This is his fear, right? He's terrified of going in there, but he was brave. He went in there to make sure she was okay.
And they certainly beat the shit out of her.
Sorry?
I said they certainly beat the shit out of her.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the next shot, when they're doing the lineup, God, her eye looks awful. It looks absolutely horrible. Like, it's as bruised as an eye could possibly be. You're in danger of losing it, kind of bruised.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they do the lineup, and obviously the police chief is like delighted, or detective is delighted. He's like, we've been after him for ages. Like we know he's, we knew it was him, but we hadn't got the evidence, and now no one wanted to testify because people are too scared to testify. So it needed a dumb white bitch like you to come in, and we were just waiting for some dumb white bitch to go down here. And
we needed somebody with no sense of
no common sense whatsoever to come in.
Terrible place and be in India.
Yeah. So they're like, hey, they're all terrified down at Cabrini Green. They all, they're all like insular, and no one testifies against anyone, so we can't get any evidence. But now we've got you, so he's going away. So to her mind, she's like, I've survived, and I've proven the Candyman was a myth. It was just a guy who was using it. So for her, this is like, oh my goodness, like it's all been worth it. I'm gonna write my paper and prove that the Candyman doesn't exist. I am gonna bury that man and his book, because now I can say this is, it was all fake and made up by this gang member. She sees Jake outside, and Jake's like, hey, you lied to me. You said that no one would find out. And she says, oh, look, no one will. You don't have to testify. I can testify. And thank you for saving my life. And he says he's convinced that Candyman's going to get him.
Yeah.
And she says, look, Candyman's like Dracula or Frankenstein. He's just made up. And the guy who made him up is going to be locked away for a long time. And she tries to convince him, but he is unconvinced. Then I think either she has Wolverine healing factor, or it's probably about a month or so later.
Yeah, I think
a period of time has passed.
Yeah.
And we see Richard is his name, I think, the husband comes through the door, and she says, "Oh, look, it's better." Trevor, that's right. She says, "Oh look, it's better," and you can see her eye is still very discolored, but you know the bruising is a lot better. And she's made this lovely meal for him, and you know she's obviously in better spirits now. She's kind of recovering. You get that awkward bit where he comes home, he's happy to see her, and she sits down, and he looks like kind of off, and she's like, "You haven't eaten, have you?" And he's like, "Oh no, of course not." And it's like, "You have, you clearly have, and now you're going to force yourself to eat a second meal to keep the secret." It's just a really well directed and acted scene where you can tell that, and almost like she's probably pushing him as well a bit by doing it, just being like, "I'm gonna make a massive meal," and just like awkwardly force you to eat it.
Xander Berkeley is great in this. Is slightly and he's been in a number of like really cool movies. I know he was in like Terminator 2 and stuff like that. Yeah. But do you know what one of my favourite movies that he's in, which is a terrible, terrible, awful movie, and I love it.
Oh, go on.
Came out a number of years after this. Is Barbed Wire.
Oh God, yes, that is a terrible film.
I love him in Barbed Wire. He's the chief police. He's a real prick.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And that movie is terrible.
Oh yeah. But it knows it's terrible. Like, it's not trying to be anything.
It knows it's terrible.
Yeah.
And I really love it. And it's blatantly ripping off Casablanca.
Yeah. But post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's got Tamora Morrison in it, who's brilliant. And it's so bad. It's so bad, but I love it so much. It's such a terrible movie that I love. And he's great in it. And you know what? I even like Pamela Anderson in it. I mean, sure. It does help that there's that amazing shower scene dance scene where she's getting wet in the outfit, which is utterly fantastic. Which is like, there's no real need for it at all, but it's brilliant.
You could argue there's no need for that movie at all, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is, and it knows what it is. I've always got time for movies that just know that they're, they know what they are.
Yeah.
Like, that movie, if it was trying to be pretentious, would be the worst thing ever. So, it's just an honest, we know what you bought your cinema ticket for.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's mostly just to see Pamela Anderson running around.
Yeah.
Shooting guns and acting badly.
Yeah, pretty much. So she meets with Bernadette, and Bernadette has good news, I guess. She has managed to get the negatives captured, because I guess she was probably worried that the camera was destroyed or lost. But it turns out that Bernadette got hold of the negatives and had them developed, so they she didn't get them developed, did she? But she's got the negatives, so she can look through the negatives.
I think they're in that box, aren't they? So I'm guessing she's made them into slides.
Yeah, she's made them into slides, because later on we get the weird thing where I'm like, I don't think slide projectors work this way, where she does the enhanced thing and she zooms in and it somehow stays completely in focus, and she can zoom into a specific bit to see that can do. It's just like Blade Runner, but with a slide projector somehow. I'm like, I don't know how this works, but cool. It's space age slide projector you've got here.
I remember using a projector.
They go out of focus if you do that generally.
Yeah, you can't do.
She zooms right into a specific part and everything. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I don't remember ever being able to focus on a certain section of a slide. But
and it's so
maybe
crisp.
It's a more advanced one than we had at school. I don't know.
Maybe the university has the most advanced slide projector known to man. I don't know. But in any case, she leaves. Bernadette leaves, and she's walking, I think, to her own car. And we get our first true full. You've briefly seen him when he killed the girl in the story, very, very briefly. Blink and you'll miss it. But this is our first appearance of Tony Todd as the Candyman. He's walking. I think you first see the coat, don't you? And he's just walking.
Well, we have. I think we see his shoes.
You see his shoes in the bottom of his coat, and he's just walking along.
The check trousers.
Yeah. And he's miles away, but you hear the voice.
We didn't mention it actually. In the opening, you've got the him saying about innocent blood and
yes.
What's blood for if not for shed? They say I will shed innocent blood, and he says, "What's blood for if not for shedding?" So we have heard him
Yeah, oh yeah, you've heard him. Yeah. But yeah, his voice carries across this car park, and she
calling Helen, and to this day, when anybody ever says their name is Helen,
you can't help but think
my brain immediately hears Tony Todd's voice going, Helen. It's like,
yeah.
Okay.
She sees him across the car park, and she's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "You know who I am." And she's like, "You're not real." And she starts going into like a dream-like trance, doesn't she? It's like she's like in this crazy.
That's another thing we haven't mentioned. We talked about it briefly before we started that, but this movie loves Virginia Madsen. The number of close-ups you get of Virginia Madsen's face.
She's got a very photogenic face.
Lovingly sort of framing her like this. I mean, she is a beautiful woman.
Yes.
But this movie really, really likes to get right in onto her face, and
yeah. She's got really amazing eyes.
Yes,
which I think is like why those close-ups look so amazing.
Yeah, and they actually they used a hypnosis technique on her.
Did they?
Yeah, so some of the scenes where her eyes are fluttering,
right,
and she was genuinely hypnotized, and
I did not know that.
A trigger word and everything apparently, but she became uncomfortable with it and basically said, "I don't want to do this anymore." So
fair enough.
But there are certain bits where she was genuinely they used hypnosis.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And I think some of the close-ups you see of her when when her eyes are flickering and that were actually genuine hypnosis, sort of trance-like state.
Yeah.
And
she says
the shot of you they see of him, like you see him right down the
when he's got his head, when he's looking up and he's kind of leaning
it's just
back.
him in that amazing stance with his arms behind his back, sort of stood there with that long coat spread out sort of thing, and it's really fucking cool. And do you know what gets me actually is he's wearing he's obviously his clothes are it's a sort of very almost it's late Victorian look.
Yes.
But it's some people in some of the original reviews actually apparently laughed when they saw what he was wearing.
Really?
Thought it was funny that he had these check trousers on and this coat, this weird coat with fur lining and that.
Well, maybe if there was no backstory, I'd kind of be like, that's a bit weird. But with the backstory, it kind of is fine.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool look.
Yeah. Well, he was a painter artist. He was pretty well to do. He was painting really rich people. I imagine he would be well dressed, and I don't think that's I'd never thought that. I always thought it was a great look, and it's quite a unique visual,
Yeah. Fact, like he's like 6'5" or something, is it?
Yeah, the fact that he was massive,
super imposing.
Especially with the voice as well. But she sees him, and he says, you called me, and she's like, I don't want any trouble, and he's like, oh, no, but you doubted me. You doubted me, and I was compelled to come. And then he says, what are without the myth of me, he basically says that without the myth, he can't exist. He exists because he's this urban myth.
Yeah.
And that her trying to disprove it by showing that it was just this guy all along destroys the legend, and he needs the legend to continue in order for him to continue existing, basically.
Yeah, he says you made my congregation doubt. I like that he says.
Yes, that's right. That's a great line. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So yeah, and she's going into this kind of trance-like state, and eventually passes out because it kind of crossfades into the bees, doesn't it? Just like a like hive of bees. And then of course she wakes up on a bathroom floor, and all we can hear is Anne-Marie screaming, and it's such a realistic scream that she's doing. She sounds like someone that's lost her child,
Yeah,
like it's a really good performance.
And I love the way she wakes up and she sees she's covered in blood.
And she checks herself.
Yeah.
It's a natural thing, isn't it? Like it's totally a natural thing.
Yeah.
And of course she realizes it's not her, but she goes out and finds the head of the dog and a meat cleaver, which she decides to pick up. I guess to protect herself, potentially.
I mean, yeah, she doesn't really know where I mean, she's disorientated and somebody's screaming. You probably would, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I guess.
She doesn't know how she got there. She doesn't know what's happened.
But then she opens the door, and Anna Marie's in there, and the crib is covered in blood as well.
Yeah, she's stood over the crib and she's screaming. Yeah. And Vanessa Estelle Williams is the actress.
Yeah.
Wow, the
she's great. Here. She is great.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. The screams of you know.
It's believable. It's believable anguish. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course he opens the door. She's holding this bloody cleaver covered in blood. And Anne Marie is immediately like, "What have you done to my baby?" Runs at her and I mean, Helen is a complete bitch a lot of times in this movie. She does get some proper punishment though. Anne Marie starts slamming her head into the floor repeatedly. But of course, and then in self-defense, Helen hits her in the shoulder with the cleaver. And then gets on top of her and holds the cleaver up and is just telling her to stop, of course, as the police burst through the door.
Yeah.
So what are they to believe? You know, understandably, she is under arrest now. Hey, the police turned up.
Yeah.
They did finally turn up. I guess maybe now that she'd kind of dealt with the gang thing, they might have had more of a chance to turn up.
Possibly.
Maybe that gang in particular were one of the reasons they wouldn't go there, and now they were like, okay, maybe we will. I don't know.
Maybe it emboldened the police.
Yes, maybe it emboldened them. That's a good point, yeah. So she's taken in and obviously, has to go through the, giving her clothes as evidence, and, she's just asking for her to speak to her husband, and she's asking for help, and of course you get that moment when she phones and she fucking knows where he is as well. She knows full well
that the scene of her stripping,
oh god, it's horrible. She's just crying her eyes out,
so uncomfortable. It's a horrible scene of her completely bloodstained, and she's just
she's like, can I please have a shower, can I please just
and it's so, and the policewoman is Rushdie Swimmer.
Yes,
who's a singer and an actress. And Madsen asked if she could do it because she's her best friend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's her friend. So she felt more comfortable with someone she knew.
Sure.
For that particular scene, and which makes a lot of sense. And it's and I love. She's a big, imposing woman.
Yeah. And she's looking at her like someone who just murdered a child and a dog, or potentially murdered a child, and definitely murdered a dog.
Yeah, because that's the thing. There is no sign of the baby.
No, the baby has disappeared. She's told by the detective who she previously saw that she is under arrest.
Who was previously really happy with her. Now
he's less happy with her now. We're less thrilled with you now.
The thing is, now you've got to think. Well, this woman's got into the same project. She's
gone insane,
killed the dog clearly, and probably done something with this, killed this baby. That's probably fucked up her case. So the gang member's probably going to get out.
That's true. That's a very good point. So yeah, and of course they question her about everything, and she's like, I don't know how I got there. I have no idea. I don't understand. She kind of claims amnesia. And she says, I want to speak to my attorney. I think I'll speak to my attorney. And yeah, so she tries to make a phone call, and obviously, like we said, he doesn't answer. And I love that in a bit he's like, I was asleep, I didn't hear it. And it's like, the phone's next to your head, dude. Like, it's literally on next to the bed. What are you talking about?
I do like the way they do. They show the ringing phone, and they show the apartment.
Yeah,
like in complete darkness.
Yeah,
and
you get her leaving the message, just saying,
"I'm in." It focuses in on pictures of the couple.
Yeah, and she's like, "I'm in prison. I just, I'm in jail. Sorry, I need help. Please pick up." And of course, she knows where he is too.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they're like, well, you can't keep phoning all night. That's it. You've had your chance.
Yep.
And that's you done. So she sent. I think I don't really understand how this works. She kind of spends like a night in the cells, and then they're like, "Well, you can go." And they're like, the lawyer's like, "Well, they think you've taken the baby or they killed the baby, so they're expecting to find the baby, which tells us they're going for murder one." And it's like, okay, but I'm sure they wouldn't just let you out though. It feels very odd that they would let you out.
The point is that they've got a rich lawyer, I'm guessing.
They must have a pretty rich lawyer. She was literally with a beheaded dog, missing child, crib covered in blood, and she was standing over an injured woman with a meat cleaver when the police came in. Like, it's like, I don't think they'd let you go, but okay, I guess the film has to continue.
I think the point is technically they've only got her on
the dog murder,
animal cruelty,
and assault, violent assault. Yeah, I guess.
So,
but you could still do like I think suspected murder.
I mean, you could probably argue that
I'd keep her for a bit. There could be. To be fair, there could be a passage of time here again because like the movie does do that a bit.
I don't think so because. When she's talking to,
or it could just be a commentary on the fact that being a upper class white woman, she's got away with it.
It's a case of she's a white woman and she's got a rich lawyer, so they've finagled it and she's got out. Obviously, they're still going to be fucking watching her like.
Oh yeah. They're they like the lawyer says. He's like, well, they're clearly aiming for murder one. They just haven't found the body yet, basically.
And I think it's the next day because she says to Trevor, "Where were you last night?" I think. So.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, she does. And he's like, "Oh, I was asleep. The phone was right next to my head, but I slept right through it. I don't know. It was weird." And she's like, "Oh yeah, you guys just think I did it," and it's like, "Oh." They're like, nobody would ever believe that, Helen. And she's like, the lawyer, in fairness, the lawyer is like, we are fucking cooked. And he's like, can you remember anything? And she's like, no. No, nothing. But, okay. It's going to be a short trial.
I mean, he could probably argue for insanity, but
I think that's probably what he was aiming for, right? He's probably like, okay.
Yeah, in the long run, it probably just means that you're going to be institutionalized.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah. So she's kind of free for now. Like you said, she has her bath, and that's when Trevor comes in. He's like, "Oh, is there anything you need?" And she's like, "I need to know where you were last night. That's what I need." And he's at the moment he is very nice to her. It's weird because he's really nice to her when he's in her presence.
Well, I think it's one of those things where he actually does love her.
He does, but he's just infatuated with this other girl.
Yeah.
He thinks he wants this other girl.
Yep.
But yeah, I think
it does get to the point where it's like, yeah, no, I don't even
like. Oh, dude, when she's in prison, she comes back and they're already painting the walls. It's like, oh my god. That is brutal. It's like 20 minutes after she was arrested, they were buying the paint in B&Q,
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's like totally confused and no idea what's happened. So she has her bath, and then I think Trevor goes presumably to work, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And she suddenly remembers, oh, I've got the slides. So, of course, she starts using the slide projector, going through the photos of the apartment when she was taking that. And like I said, it's a bit naff, but fine for cinema.
Yeah.
In one of the shots, the Candyman is stood behind her, and she manages to zoom in and find this image. And it's a really cool image of just like the Candyman kind of, there's almost a silhouette.
I mean, that's kind of why you get away with it, because it's well done.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's fine. It's cinema. It's fine.
Really cool image.
It's nitpicky to complain about. It's a really cool shot, and
we're gonna do it anyway.
Yeah. That's what we do. I'm not suggesting it ruins the movie or anything. It's still an amazing shot. It's fine. It's just things that you find funny, in movies. Especially having been, a student in the 90s, a working office worker in the early 2000s. I've used enough projectors in my time.
Yeah, exactly.
to be like, that don't work. But fine, whatever. Yeah, so she's, she does see some evidence that the Candyman was there. So she's starting to think now, well, maybe I didn't imagine the Candyman. Maybe he is real. Unless I'm also imagining this bit. But, I guess she's working with what she can. But yeah, and she decides she's going to call the Candyman, right? Because she goes back to the mirror.
Yep.
And she... I think she calls him here, doesn't she?
I think so.
And then that's when Bernadette comes, right?
Yeah.
Because the Candyman turns up, doesn't he? He comes through his hand comes through the mirror, doesn't it?
The hook hand comes through the cabinet.
Yeah, I say hand. I meant hook. Yes, he doesn't have a hand.
Which she didn't know was that going to happen. So that look she gives when she
genuinely, the actress didn't know. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, the look she gives when she screams and runs away.
It is very convincing.
Was true. She didn't know he was behind the thing, and she didn't know.
Oh, well, yeah, it is a realistic reaction.
It's true. So the hand, the hook, it's made by a blacksmith. But apparently, when they went to pick it up, he was a religious man, and he'd found out what it was for. It was going to be in his home, and he refused to give it to them. So I think they had to sort of like persuade him to hand it over in the end. I don't know whether they gave him more money or not, but yeah, because originally I think they had almost like an electronic prosthesis for him. But it was too awkward and didn't quite work. Right. They wanted it, and I don't think it had the right look. So they then chose to have the bloodied stump with the hook.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
Wedged in.
So he appears, and she tries running. She tries running out the apartment. He appears in the hallway. She runs back in. He appears back inside because she locks the door, and then he's inside again. She can't get away. Again, she starts going into that trance, and he says, your disbelief, brought me here, and without his congregation, he's nothing. He had to come, and he's repeating a lot of what he said previously.
He's saying, he says, but it's the way he says it, it's like, be my victim.
Yeah, he says, and now I must kill you, and your death will basically bring his congregation back together. He says, come with me and be immortal, and
it's the way he describes it as this existence of being. You're immortal, but you don't. It's almost like he says you don't have to deal with all the boring bits. You just exist. You are.
Yeah. But then, of course, there is a knock at the door, and she knows who it is. It's Bernadette, and she tries to call to Bernadette, but she just can't. She's like paralyzed, and he stabbed her in the neck, hasn't he? She's like bleeding from the neck at this point.
No, I think it's the back of her head. I think.
Oh, it might be. Yeah.
He puts the hook round her, doesn't he?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he kind of does to pull her close, and
and it's almost it's almost like a gentle caress, even though he stabbed her, and she's sort of bleeding, and she's stretched out on the kitchen floor, and of course Bernie's knocking on the door, and she's screaming, "Run, run!"
Yeah. But of course Helen comes in. Bernadette comes in.
Yeah, well, you think, of course, if your friend, you hear your friend making noise, you're going to come in, aren't you? You're going to try and help your friend.
And this is one of those shots where I think it shows how much gross it can be when you don't see but just hear something.
Yeah.
Because she goes in, the door slams behind her, she turns around, sees Candyman. You see Helen on the floor saying no, no, no. And then all you hear is Tony Todd's grunting and the sound of flesh being kind of torn apart. It's gross.
And Casey Lemons is who plays Bernadette.
She's great.
What a wonderful performance that is as well.
Yeah.
The look of terror when she turns around and sees him is wonderful. She's really great. And it's one of those times when you're watching a horror movie that you genuinely go, no, don't go in there.
Yeah.
She's one of those characters that you actually don't want to die in a movie, you know?
No, like, totally. She's the one you want to live.
When you watch horror movies, you know, especially slashers.
I think of everyone in this movie is like Anna Marie and Bernadette are like the two that I'm like, yeah, and Jake. I want Jake to live, obviously.
Yeah,
that goes without saying. Kids go without saying, but yeah,
it's one of those things that's very different. About, you know, usually in a slasher movie, most of the time you want those people to die because they're all annoying teenagers, or you know, they're all like things you go, yeah, you deserve to die. Yeah, she's lovely and she does not deserve what happens to her.
No, absolutely not. Trevor comes back and she's on the floor holding a knife covered in blood. So the police are called.
Yeah, funny that.
She like tries to escape and of course comes across Bernadette's corpse and then, you know, bursts into tears. So they take her in and they sedate her. Although she does get that moment where she's like, "Oh, hold me, Trevor," and he does. It's like, okay, you know.
When they're taking in, he's sort of holding her hand, isn't he, as they're wheeling her in?
Yeah.
And he does look genuinely upset.
He does. Well, like you said, I think he is. He definitely loves her. He just loves this other girl as well. Mm-hmm. And you know, so yeah, she's taken to the. I think it's still the police station. But she kind of passes out in the back of the car, doesn't she? And she starts having the dreams about the apartment and whatnot. The original murder apartment, the Candyman hideout place.
Yeah.
Where Candyman keeps his coffin like Dracula for some reason at the end of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. He does. He does have that sort of, you know, later on when she goes into the place.
Yeah, he's asleep and everything.
He's asleep on a slab sort of thing, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
but she does have the flash of seeing the kid there in her dreams, which is why she. So
they have shown us that the baby is in there, and I don't know whether it's this part or whether it's a bit later, but you do see the Candyman is sort of basically giving the child honey.
I think that's a little later, but yeah, it's the same kind. I think it's the same scene. They just kind of spliced it and put it into numerous bits of the film. But yeah, she's taken in, and basically they're like, well, she's insane, clearly at this point. So they strap her down to to a bed, and sedate her. As soon as they leave the room, Candyman, of course, appears to her. And it's a great shot. I really love it because he kind of like hovers over her and you know. And then he disappears under the bed just as they come in, and she's like, "Hey, he's under the bed. He's under the bed."
Yeah, screaming, "He's here! He's here! He's under the bed."
Yeah, and it's like, okay, you clearly sound insane. Yeah. And I love the speech because Candyman says, he says something about how do the good know how to live if not for the actions of the bad, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something around like the bad teach the good effectively.
Yeah.
Like he's a necessary evil. He needs to exist.
He's like the living embodiment of the fairy tales that you tell your children to not go into the woods or to not
behave yourself, or the Candyman will get you.
Don't trust strangers, and you know,
eat your vegetables, or the Hookman will rip you to pieces.
And basically, you know, the basics of the Candyman are based on two. You know, urban legends.
Actual urban legends. Yeah,
Bloody Mary.
Yeah,
with the mirror thing,
mm-hmm.
And then you've got the hook hand guy.
I was trying to think of the other ones. There were a bunch of mirror ones. Obviously, Bloody Mary, I believe, is the first that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's the sort of biggest one. But there's
like a whole bunch of them
of summoning them. So, real story from my youth. Me and a group of kids when we were at school. We did the Bloody Mary thing in the mirror.
Okay.
And
all of your friends are dead now?
They are, yes. Yeah, they're all dead.
Dead.
But we genuinely did it. And it's supposed to be the tap runs with blood.
That's right. Yeah.
It didn't, but it did splutter.
Did you? I bet you
The
fucking
tap
shat
fluttered,
yourselves.
We all shat ourselves.
That's amazing.
And ran out of that bathroom as fucking quick as we possibly could.
That's
Didn't
brilliant.
go back into that bathroom ever.
You see, the taps are still running in there to this day.
Yeah, to this day, this absolutely. Yeah, so
I love.
Obviously, nothing really happened, but the taps fluttered, and that was enough for us.
I love the nurses or whatever come in, and they start taking off her restraints. She wakes up, she's like, where are we going? And you know this guy could not resist. He's been waiting his whole life to be like, we're going to Disneyland. It's like, yeah, okay. That was fine. It was a good line. But yeah, so she's being taken to I think it's like a defense attorney that she goes to be wheeled into, right? Because it's not the same guy. It's not the lawyer guy from before. It's someone else.
He's a doctor.
Or is he a psychiatrist kind of guy?
Psychiatrist. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because he's got like a stack of 4 TVs ready to show her evidence 4 times for no reason. He's like, look, here it is 4 times simultaneously. And he shows her the footage of her saying he's under the bed, and of course we see it's just her.
He does say to her, was the killer there that when you came in? And she's like, yeah, of course he was. He's like, sort of thing, and he's like, he shows the picture, and obviously Candyman does not appear in the footage.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those typical horror movie things. Is like, everybody who works in a mental asylum is a dick.
Oh yeah, it's the rules. Yeah.
There's never any nice people in these things, are there?
No, and he points out to her, he's like, yeah, you've been unconscious for like a week or something, wasn't it? Like a couple of weeks. Because she's been just drugged so heavily, she's completely unaware of whatever. And he's basically there to assess whether she's even capable of standing trial. That's basically his job.
Yeah.
And like you said, he shows her the footage, and he says, was the killer there? And she said, yes, he was in the room, and shows her the footage that wasn't the case. And he says, like, is the murderer in this room now? Yeah. And she's like, no, but I can call him.
Yeah.
And as fate would have it, there is a mirror in the room. So she calls him, and nothing happens, and they're both like, well, and there we go.
For a second, he's looking around the room.
Yeah.
He gets that fucking sarcastic smile on his face, sort of thing, just begins to. And
then he spits blood, and Tony Todd appears from behind him, ripping him apart. I kind of love how it's not like, in a slasher movie, like Jason Voorhees will just rip someone in half. Like, you could tell, like, the Candyman has to take some real effort to slash these people the way he does, because it's not it's not like a serrated edge. It's a fucking hook.
It's got a point, but it's a blunt.
Yeah, so he's just forcing that through.
Yeah, he's tearing the person's flesh with a blunt instrument, basically.
Yeah. So he rips this guy's back open.
His grunting and the sounds of tearing flesh it's really brutal.
It is. And then he removes her restraints, and then we get like the one awkward shot of the whole movie when he disappears out through the window.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a cool stunt, but you can clearly see the wires. It's kind of like, I guess he needed to show her the way out, so the window had to be smashed. Yeah. But I kind of feel like it would have been a more effective shot if he'd just broken the window and then disappeared or something, rather than do the disappear through the window thing.
I like it because I like the way he just sort of crosses his arms.
It looks cool, but it's just
like, he ejects himself out of the room, and it is cool. But as you say, you can see you can see the bungee or whatever it is they used to pull him out.
And then this nurse.
It's a shame, but it's very cool.
This fucking nurse. She's like scaling outside the window, and she starts tapping on the window, and the nurse is like, yeah, I'll let you in. She's like, opens the window and immediately gets assaulted.
I suppose you do. What else are you going to do?
I think if it was like a mental institute, I'd be like, going to call a couple of people.
She's inpatient,
I suppose.
Gown and stuff, so you...
I would be like, wait there, I'm calling people now. I'm not opening this by myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she because she is out on the window covered in blood, but it should be said. But anyway, she dresses up as that lady, smart, and manages to escape as the police come up. And then, of course, this is where she ends up going home.
Yeah.
And she walks into an apartment that's being freshly painted. All the furniture is covered, and some pink walls, which she says she fucking hates, which I quite like. Was a good line. I fucking hate the decor.
She almost has a second Doctor moment where she comes in and goes, "Oh, you've redecorated."
Yeah, I don't like it. Yeah. And oh my god, this fucking guy, man! It's the way he says it, like, because she starts crying because the girl turns around and sees Helen there and just immediately starts crying.
Her reaction is brilliant.
Yeah, no, her reaction's great. But then he's so creepy when he's like, "Oh, what's wrong, honey bun? You got a boo-boo." And it's like, "Oh my god, you're talking to her. Now you sound like a pedo. Now you're talking to her like she's fucking 12 or something." It's like, dude, what weird fucking relationship is this?
Yeah.
Creepy.
Well, it's clearly that he's getting off on the whole teacher.
Yeah, the teacher-student thing. It's weird. I mean, I know obviously he's a uni student, so it's not, but it is still like, oh... You're kind of like, you're enjoying the age gap. It's kind of gross.
You're making it very easy for us to hate you.
Yeah, totally. But of course, what I like about this scene is that you can see Helen kind of enjoys that they're scared of her. There's like some enjoyment there where she's like, "This is the worst day of my life, week of my life, month of my life, but I can have this moment. This probably is my last moment on Earth, but I get to scare the hell out of both of you."
She's very calm at first, and
she is, but then she gets that smile.
It's a sort of she's almost accepting. She's like, "Oh,
yeah,
course.
yeah."
It's like, oh, it's all I was right all the time, all along. Everything slots in, and she's like, "Oh yeah, okay, right. It all makes sense and stuff." But it's when she's like, she says, "Oh, what, you want to phone the cops on me? You want to call the police and stuff?"
Yeah, she's got that smile.
She gets the phone and she's like, thrusting it.
I dare you! I double dare you!
And the look in Virginia Madson's eyes is like full on crazy eyes. It's like amazing the look she gives, and the actress who plays is it Stacey? I can't remember.
Something like that. Yeah, I can't remember.
I love her reaction when she turns around and she completely crumbles.
Yeah.
In fright, and she, bless her, she's in a corner of the room, and if she could get any further into the wall, she would. It's really good.
It's great. She then has that moment again where she's like, "I'm not a murderer," and it's like, oh, dude. At this stage, you're not convincing anyone. Let's be honest.
There's no way they're not fucking.
And she kind of gets annoyed. I understand her being annoyed at Trevor for all of it, right?
Yeah.
But when she's like, "Oh, you want to phone the hospital, don't you?" And it's like, well, look, even if he wasn't cheating on you and he really cared for you, it probably is the best thing to do right now. Like, genuinely, like, what do you expect?
Yeah. This is not a good look for.
No.
For any case.
This is bad.
That we might have had before. I mean, clearly, there's no way she's not going to get done for the murder of the Doctor, for a start. But she was the only person in that room.
No. Yeah, absolutely. And again, she was holding a knife. I mean, this time it's more like the Candyman put the knife in her hand. Obviously, previously she picked up the cleaver, but... Which is good, I think, because if she'd picked it up the second time, you'd be like, how dumb are you to pick up a knife again after what happened the last time? But it is clearly this time the Candyman presumably put it in her hand. There are moments as well, because it kind of does a good point. Up to this point, you're like, did she murder them? Did Candyman make her murder them? But then in the scene with the psychiatrist, it's clear the Candyman did it. There's no doubt at that point that the Candyman definitely did that murder.
Doesn't it go into that more in the later ones?
I think it does, yeah.
So he actually does use them. It's almost like he inhabits them to do the murders. So there is certainly an element of that. Yeah,
it might be a mix of both, because obviously killing someone with a hook would be very different from killing someone with a cleaver or a knife.
That's I guess the inconsistency, especially with Bernie's corpse.
Yes.
Is when you look, you do get
it's clearly not a knife. Yeah,
you get a very brief look at Bernie's corpse, and it's like, yeah, that is not a knife wound. That's a tear. That's a you know, it would have been a much cleaner wound if it was done with the knife that she had.
Yeah. So, with nowhere else to go, she's like, well, I guess I can at least save this kid. I mean, I could do one thing. So she heads to the lair of the Candyman. And this is where we get all of our Dracula stuff right at the end of the movie. Or it kind of becomes much more apparent. I think it's one of the things I wish, because I quite like it, but I wish they would have integrated it a little more and kind of spent a bit more time with it. It feels a bit rushed to get to this point of the movie to be like, oh yeah, Helen, you look just like the woman I fell in love with, and here I am in my tomb, and Yeah,
it's always been you, Helen. It's always been you and stuff. But I think I don't know whether I'm just projecting, but for me, I think that's part of the myth thing.
No, you're probably right. I think you're right with that.
I think it's a case of probably she doesn't look like the original Helen, if you like, and it's just a case of she now fits into that role. It's that part of it. She's now become part of the story. So I think it's not necessarily that she is. It's just a case of you're now part of the myth.
Yeah. Maybe like the myth will say that it was always you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like the myth going forward will say it was always you.
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe people will say that you looked like my love, and maybe that's it. But of course she sees the murals depicting what happened to the Candyman and how his hand was cut and how he was killed by the bees, and then in a moment we see that it's Helen in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
They make a big point of focusing on her eyes, which I think is good because the actress's eyes are the most distinguishing thing about her face, I think.
Yeah.
So they kind of, to really drive that home. But so we get this weird thing where the Candyman's just kind of asleep on a slab.
Yeah.
Which is odd because he just kind of appears and disappears at will, and it feels a bit weird that he's just sleeping there. But I guess he's doing it on purpose. He's I'm sure he's well aware that she's there.
That seems to be the sort of the thing, isn't it? It's that. It's his lair. It's the sort of why wouldn't he be there asleep? It's that he's just waiting for the next.
Yeah.
His existence is he sleeps until he is called, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it does make sense. Again, it's that whole it's the story stuff. It's the if you think of it logically, it doesn't.
It doesn't, and it kind of is a bit weird if you think, well, there's one thing to be leaving offerings to him, but if you were leaving offerings to him and he was literally asleep on a slab in the room, that does change the framing of the story somewhat.
So his layer is above the.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So she gets that bit where she climbs up
and
goes into it, like she kind of knows where she's going. So again, it all leans into this sort of this mythical element of the story, and how we perceive things and how the way stories are told.
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
Maybe I'm just maybe I'm doing its job for it, but that's kind of
I think it's fine. Like I said, I'm just nitpicking. It's all good. And then of course she passes out in his arms, and he carries her off, and I love she's like, he asks her if she's scared of the pain or what comes after, and she says both, and he says, well, you've got nothing to fear. He says the pain will be exquisite, but there's nothing to fear after.
Yeah.
And he basically says we are immortal, and
I love it. It's such a beautiful. So he
does. I think there is that point as well when Tony Todd really has that expressive look, like he really cares for her, and he looks genuinely.
It's gentle. The whole the scene where he's talking to her and he's sort of almost caressing her, and he picks her up, and there's a shot of her face and she's crying.
Because there's tears on his face at one point as well.
The light is flickering on her face, and it's the camera making love to her. It's the way it's looking, And yeah, it's this sort of almost tender, sort of seductive, but horrible moment.
Now, I will say, if I was Tony Todd and this movie had come along, I would have been like, oh, I'm 100% on board. Talk me through this character. I love it. Yeah. And then Tony Todd's the one that comes up with the bees. And it's like, yeah, I've come up with this great backstory, guys. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. So what we're going to do is we're going to put bees in your mouth. I would have been like, oh, fuck. Why have I agreed?
Yeah,
I backed myself into this corner.
Yeah, he came up with the backstory, but I don't think he came up with the bees.
No, I'm sure he didn't. But when they said it, he was probably like, I probably started this by going into a backstory. God damn it.
So he did negotiate that.
Did he? I would as well, because that's the one thing. I wouldn't mind bees necessarily crawling on me, but in my mouth, I would be very concerned.
So he got $1,000 for every time he was stung.
Oh, wow.
And I think he was stung 23 times. I think there are various things, but it's between 26 and 23 times I think he was stung. And the bees themselves were specially bred bees.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. They're not just grabbing random bees and yeah.
Yeah. But they were bred to be only so many days old, I think it is.
Okay.
So that they could look at they could look at like adults, but they were actually sort of juvenile bees.
So the sting isn't as bad.
Weren't as developed.
Sure.
So they weren't, as bad. And I think Virginia Madsen was and she was very apprehensive about the bees as well, and she said she was allergic, but they tested her and she wasn't. But it was
I would have said I was allergic though. That would have been my bullshit excuse. I'd have been like, no, I'm allergic, guys.
And Tony Todd said that obviously they had like a dental dam in the back of his throat, so that the bees wouldn't go down his throat.
Yeah, they're not going to kill him. Yeah.
He had they placed all the bees in his mouth, and he said he basically zoned out so that he wouldn't panic.
Sure, I guess you have to, right? You have to go somewhere in your head to.
Yeah, so he zoned out and just sort of like kind of went with it, and then they had like a vacuum, this sort of to take them off. They like vacuum up the bees gently, sort of when they get rid of them. But yeah, you can imagine. There are certain movies when you see the like people have genuinely had like bugs in their mouths and things, and you think how, especially in '92.
Yeah.
The effects in '92 would have been pretty ropey if they decided to do computer generated ones. So you kind of have to really use.
You're doing it.
Want that good a shot?
I mean, it looks amazing. Do not get me wrong. The shot is great. It's just the idea of having to do it. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I do not want those anyway. I don't like fucking bees anyway.
I will be honest with you. I'm not the wealthiest person on the planet, and if someone came up to me now and was like, if we put bees in your mouth and you'll get $1,000 every time you're stung, I think I would still say no. To be honest, I'd be like, no, I'm good. I think I'll live without the money.
One of the things that the director got them to do as well, but to make them have a better relationship, was they went ballroom dancing together.
Oh, really?
So yeah, the director,
that's cool,
and Madsen, they did ballroom dancing so that they would have a better bond.
Huh.
And I think, wow, I imagine they were really cool as a couple.
It's quite a height difference there, I think, but yeah.
But I imagine it looked really good.
I would imagine so. I hope he was wearing the full Candyman outfit when he did. I'm sure he didn't, but that would have looked really cool.
I think, but that's another thing about Tony Todd, as is even though he's this hulking guy, his movements are very graceful. He has a very graceful and cultured appearance. It works so well. I mean, I even though like I said, Eddie Murphy was what they wanted, and there were probably other people as well. I could not imagine anybody else pulling it off as well as Todd did.
No, there's no one. And the new actor struggled, who was doing it. Obviously, it does tie in eventually, but there is that like, you're not Tony Todd though.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in any case, he picks up the child. She passes out again. He picks up the child and he says it's time for a new legend to be born, and he takes the kid.
Yeah.
she then wakes up sometime after, and of course realizes what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And as she leaves the apartment, she actually can hear the baby, can't she? She can already hear the baby.
Yeah.
So she knows exactly where the baby is. I think
she from her point, she's agreed to be his victim so that the baby
the baby will live. That was the bargain. Yeah.
But he's clearly full of shit. He's lying to her.
Yeah.
Because he wants the bigger, I guess, the bigger shock. You know.
Is her dying in there with the baby is much more of a shock than.
Yeah, he wants the legend to be bigger and more brutal, I guess.
Yeah. Jake hears her rummaging through the bonfire as she searches for the child. And he wakes up and kind of witnesses her going in, I think, or at least he hears her go in.
It's Candyman. That's why
that's right. Yeah, he thinks it's Candyman at this stage.
Candyman,
which is why they come out with the kerosene and the yeah. So yeah, all of the kids of Cabrini Green and some of the adults all kind of turn up with their torches and whatnot. Meanwhile, Helen is deep, and I mean, this is a big bonfire. It's not.
Yeah, it's a huge bonfire.
You get those shots where she sees the child, and she's trying to climb down to get to him, and it's kind of interspliced with those shots of the kids throwing the kerosene on board.
So I mean, it's like maze-like, because she's like pulling herself.
Yeah.
Through things to get to the baby.
Yeah. And of course she finally gets to him, and then of course the Candyman grabs her and says, "I knew you would come." The fire is started, and he tells her to be quiet. He like covers her mouth, doesn't he, as well, so she can't even scream. He this is exactly what he wants. Like you said, he's upping the stakes by having the child killed with her as well.
Yep.
It's perfect. His myth will continue forever.
Yeah.
But luckily for her, she manages to grab, I guess, a bit of debris.
It's like a flaming plank, isn't it?
Flaming plank, yeah. And she manages to stab it in his chest, which we saw earlier is all kind of open and ripped open.
It's really. I love that as well. That design is basically just an open rib cage with bees in. It's really cool.
She gets away with the child. He like kind of thrashes around with the hook and manages to break some stuff that falls on her. So now she's got burning wood on her. She's still holding the baby. She just continues to crawl. And you get that shot where she's crawling out with her hair on fire. They manage to put her out, and of course they realize that she's got the baby in her hand.
And you get those wonderful shots of, like, from the perspective from the fire, from the bonfire, and you're looking out at
Anna Marie.
Yeah. And see the sort of how broken she is as she's sort of staring off, not really focusing, but she's just there.
Yeah.
And how broken she is. It's a wonderful shot. And of course, you've got her Helen as she crawls out and hands the baby out, and people rush to sort of put her out. But...
Yeah, and she succumbs to her wounds. The Candyman's calling her back, but then of course ends up bursting into flames himself.
Yeah.
And it's Jake that sees him.
His screams of no, come back.
Yeah.
It's rage, but also I think it's also sadness.
There is some love there, and some
it feels like
he wanted her to be immortal with him.
Yeah, it's a betrayal, isn't it, for him?
Yeah. And of course, she succumbs to her wounds after they get the child back. And one of I think one of the best scenes in this movie, the final scene with the funeral, when all of the people of Cabrini Green turn up.
Yeah,
I love that shot because you can see Trevor's face when he's like, well, "What is going on?" And they're all
because there's only him sort of there.
Him and the girlfriend who hated her anyway.
Yeah, and maybe one other person. Oh, and the other long-haired professor.
Yes,
well.
That's right. Yeah.
And
the professor's like, "I'm writing the second book."
I think it's him that notices that. I think he says something, and Trevor looks around and like.
Oh yeah, he does. Yeah, he doesn't. He's like Trevor, like
and he's startled by the the vision of this long line of mourners from Cabrini Green coming up the cemetery towards the grave.
Yeah,
and little Jake
carrying the hook.
He's got the hook in his coat, and he unzips the coat and pulls it out and throws it on her.
Mm-hmm.
Her coffin,
and they all kind of lay flowers and pay their respects to her. Because like the people of Cabrini Green know that, hey, the Candyman was real and you saved us from him. There is that, like, her character is redeemed in the eyes of the people at Cabrini Green.
And now she's become part of the myth in a different way, not the way that the Candyman wanted.
In a positive way. She showed that the Candyman can be defeated. He can be,
She's like a redeemer. She's almost the final shot of the painting has her as almost like a saint. She has that sort of, the saint-like quality as the camera comes out, pans out of this beautiful mural.
Yeah.
It's never clear whether the murals are done by anybody there or whether they're, again, part of the bigger myth. Did these paintings just appear, or did someone do them?
Yeah. Sometime later, Trevor is in hell. He is living with this teenage moron. She's unhappy. He's unhappy. Everyone's unhappy. And he's like basically crying on the toilet while she's annoyed at having to make food and just, she's just miserable and bored and annoyed. You can tell they've both regretting their choices here. They're both regretting their life choices because she's now moved in as well. So she's like kind of stuck here right now. And so, he's crying on the toilet. And of course he thinks about, Helen. Unfortunately, he's looking at a mirror at the time he's thinking about it. Yeah. And he might say her name a number of times.
Yeah, and it's not
intentional. It's great. It's great.
It's that sorrowful. Oh, Helen.
Yeah.
Helen. Oh, it's that sorrowful thing. He's not saying it as a 5, time thing.
No.
He just so happens that it's that wistful thing that he's saying.
Yeah.
Which just so happens to be the wrong thing, mate.
It's almost like the last one's the one that almost feels like it was a thing,
a final thing.
Maybe maybe it was meant to be more of a final goodbye kind of thing.
Yeah.
But of course she turns up with the hook.
Yep.
And some I don't know if you'd call it poetic justice because it's quite an awful thing to have happened, but this girl who is, other than cheating on Trevor, she is relatively innocent, comes in and presumably gets blamed for the murder of Trevor because she's holding the knife at the end and everything.
Yeah.
Although there's no blood on her or the knife, so you think,
you, of all the people that get murdered, he's more deserving than.
No, he is, but I don't know that she deserves to be framed for murder, and
no, certainly not.
But yeah, and of course we cut to credits. We get that great the great shots of the artwork through the credits as well, which is really cool.
Where it's Saint Helen sort of thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, wonderful film that's held up really well.
The soundtrack, and it's got this. It's a beautiful.
We did mention it briefly, yeah.
Yeah, but I love how it's a sort of this. It's almost this gentle piano score, but then it swells to this big with gothic organ.
The chanting as well. The version when they start chanting is amazing.
It's a fucking great score.
So cool.
It's such a big. When you get to the bombastic parts, when he's talking, when the Candyman is talking to Helen, and it's the really big organ playing. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and like you said, it kind of falls in with the theme because it is like a congregation and it is like a sermon. It is great.
The Church of Candyman.
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely wonderful film. Yeah, R.A.P. Tony Todd. And wonderful work by Bernard Rose directing here.
Yeah.
Who also, I think, co-wrote it. So.
Yeah, so he ran into Clive Barker not long after Barker had done Nightbreed.
Okay.
And he expressed interest in the story,
and
Barker basically said, yeah, well, he liked the sound of what he wanted to do, and gave him permission to use it. And Nightbreed is another movie which we'll cover at some point. I love Nightbreed. But yeah, Bernard Rose had previously done a movie which I don't know whether you've seen. Have you ever seen Paper House?
No.
It's a really weird movie about a girl who draws this house, and there's like lots of weird dream stuff in it, and there's like she draws this house, and she ends up there, and she draws a boy in the window, and this boy ends up there, and they talk, and he's like
sounds
a
interesting
boy, and it turns out he's real, and there's this really weird sort of family stuff in it. It's a really good movie. I recommend it. It's a very odd little sort of fantasy movie. I like it a lot. And he did that before, and he went on to do Immortal Beloved and stuff like that. But he did the Frankie Goes to Hollywood videos.
Right.
So he did. I think it was Two Tribes and what was the other one he did? Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. He did that one as well, and apparently he's worked a number of times with Holly Johnson. He's a really good director. I think sort of kind of underrated actually, because you don't really hear many people mention him. But I think Candyman is I think a really, really great movie.
It's wonderful, and it has held up amazingly well.
Yeah,
like I that stunt when they pulled him through the window, I said was the ropiest shot in the movie, and it is. But it's fine. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, not a single other shot in this movie looks dated. It looks as good today as it ever did. It's wonderful. This film is so well shot. Those like I said, those sky shots are amazing. It really like almost turns into art. That kind of it's art out of suburbia somehow. It's amazing. Yeah, really, really good film with great performances.
The shot of the city and the bees.
Yeah,
on that are a little.
Yeah.
But I don't think that takes anything away from the movie overall. It's still a wonderful movie. And as I said, it gets sort of slotted into the slasher genre, but it's not. It's a
no.
It's a supernatural horror. It's a wonderful. I like the whole idea of the myth and the way it uses that. He can't exist without the faith and all that sort of stuff. It's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that was the Candyman. No, that was Candyman. Sorry, I always keep calling it the Candyman, and it's not. It's fucking not. It's Candyman from 1992. A wonderful film. Cannot recommend it enough. If you've never watched it, you should watch it. If you've watched it before, it's definitely worth a rewatch. It's aged wonderfully. And we will be back next week. We'll find some new movies to watch. But until then, stay safe, take care, and we will catch you next time.